I coughed at the beginning of that recording, so I'm gonna have to record it again. I'm just kidding. I did cough, but it was I just hit record again. Easy stuff, right? So today we're gonna think for a second. I'm gonna try to think while I'm talking, and it's not gonna work out because I didn't really come into this with any sort of plan. I was just reading some conversation on Discord. There is somebody who is like really vehemently obey Microsoft TOS or you are an evil person. Now, personally, fully disagree with that. I think for software that you don't legally own, you are merely licensed it. There is no morally questionable, whatever the fuck. Don't fucking worry about it. Piracy is 100% ethical all of the fucking time. If you only pay a license for it, there is absolutely nothing wrong with you bypassing the license ever. Just personal opinion. So with that hot take out of the way, we're gonna talk a bit about the Windows 10 EOL because I've made a few videos on it. I don't really use Windows. I have a little mini PC with Windows 11 on it. It can run Linux, but I do need just a random PC laying around in case I have to run like a tool for a computer repair or something. Sometimes you just need to have a Windows computer sitting around, because there's a lot of software that's only written for Windows, especially when you get into like DIY stuff. Now, luckily, a lot of that stuff is coming out for Linux, which is really cool. So I hope that one day I will just need no Windows computers around ever. But basically, that computer just sits around and waits for something to come up that actually needs it, which is usually never, but is there just in case. Now, for the people that have Windows 10, I donate a few computers to charity now. They give me computers, I reimage them, and I try to fix them, and I give them back to them without putting any money into it, basically. And the problem with charities right now is you're giving out these old Pentium i3 Haswell Ivy Bridge kind of computers out to people, and you have to put something on them. They have to run an operating system, obviously. So you've got very few options at this point, because the most common option is just to put Windows on them. And I have no qualms with pirating Windows and putting it on it, but I shouldn't for anything I'm doing. Uh, I shouldn't do that, but just due to licensing issues. But I don't really give a shit. Uh, if anybody asks, I didn't reimage them basically. But I have like 5 different USBs lying around for that kind of thing. And they all ran Windows 10. I had like one Windows 11 USB, and you couldn't use Ventoy for it, so I needed the Windows computer to write it. Whereas Windows 10 and LTSC, I think 11 LTSC will run on Ventoy. Now Ventoy's got its own security issues, but I'm like, what's the risk of running Ventoy? It's you fucking just run it to get into an installer. Who gives a shit if it's got the XZ backdoor in it? And like a bunch of binary blobs and stuff, who cares? But the other thing though is with these 5 different USBs I have one for LTSC that does legacy boot, because Windows you can't boot from either legacy or UEFI. Like on Linux, you have to actually write it with that on the USB to tell it whether to boot from that or that. So two I've got like an LTSC one, and then I had a what was it? I had an 11 education, and I think I'm gonna switch over to education N, because education N is like the best version of Windows you can get, since it comes mostly debloated, but it's also a semi-annual release channel, so it works with newer computers. It has all the shit people want on it, like an image viewer and stuff, and it supports like newer NVIDIA graphics cards with their drivers and stuff, whereas LTSC being a bit outdated, it sometimes has graphical glitches with newer hardware. So don't want that, you want your stuff to be running a relatively recent build of Windows, at least within half a year. So, I was using that, and then I had LTSC for a legacy boot on computers where their UEFI just didn't work for whatever reason. So, but what's happened is now with Windows 10 going EOL, I pretty much have to switch to LTSC, and I'm not going to do that personally because unless I'm like reselling the computer and I have like some sort of plausible deniability that I didn't know what was on it, which is kind of how I do things right now. I just say I don't know. It came with whatever it came with. If it came with a copy of Doom 2 on it, that's not my problem. But for these computers that I mean, I have to re-image all of them because especially like computers coming in pawn, you have to like get people's stuff off of it. So I'm not doing that. You know, if they give me a PS5, I'm wiping the PS5. If they give me an Xbox, I wipe it. If they give me a tablet or whatever, I don't even take tablets because of that stupid like Apple products, smartwatches, tablets, earbuds, that kind of stuff I don't take. But part of the reason for that is they have like a lock on them, so if you had stolen it from work or something, it could be locked. And people, they have to try to convince me that their computer is not locked, but when I ask them about it, they don't even know what I'm talking about. So I'm like, well, I can't take it if it might be locked, I don't know. Because that's happened before. I've gotten like iPads that were locked to a school network or something, or like a school policy or whatever. And I didn't want to bypass it, so I just threw it out. But for Windows, what am I gonna do for a customer? What is a computer going to look like for a customer? Because for the most part, I mostly take cheap laptops. Those are the easiest things to sell. It's hard to put out a desktop. Nobody really wants them. Even gaming desktops, like pawn shops, just generally won't take them. And people will ask me that. They'll be like, "Well, isn't it an expensive computer? I mean, I paid a lot of money for this." And it's like, yeah, but I don't know anything about it. I can't test it. I can't sell it. So, there's too much stuff to look at on this. Whereas on a console, it's like just make sure it boots, plays a disc, and the controller doesn't drift. That's really about it. Everything else is like just look at the machine. So PCs involve a lot more testing and stuff and making sure everything works and a lot more setup. It actually takes, if I get a computer in these days, it takes about a full day to flash new Windows and and get it going for, and have it demoable. Because that's the reason I had to use semi-annual release channels, is because on 11 especially, you're not able to do bypass NRO anymore. So you would use an enterprise version like education, which has less ad services enabled than the enterprise binary. So you would use that, and then N further strips out stuff like AI features because they're illegal in the EU. So education N is what I would use for that. But honestly, what's going to happen in the near future, and this is what the charities are worried about, is most of the computers we get are in, this kind of ropes back to what I was saying, was we don't really get good computers. We get these trashy, old netbooks or whatever, and all this is basically for people that just want to get online and check their email. This isn't like their daily device or whatever. They use your phone for everything. But sometimes you need like a proper laptop. So we get like these little cheap netbooks or whatever, and sometimes like a gaming laptop, very rarely. Now I gotta be careful about those too because those drivers are gonna be old and that's gonna be an issue. So we're running these old computers though, and yeah, I could put, for like very extreme cases, I put LTSC on them 2021 because I mean that's the only way to debloat it far enough that it'll run well on 4 gigs of RAM and 64 gigs of eMMC storage or whatever. And you gotta wipe off the S mode and all that because that's usually what those things come with. And even though S mode was discontinued, I can't sign into a Microsoft account to disable it, so I end up having to install new Windows anyways. It really is just good practice to switch the edition of Windows over to something better. But for charity, not only do I have licensing issues, but I wanna give them something that I know is gonna be secure for a long time, so I'm giving them a long-term solution. And what we're discovering with Windows is, Microsoft has put out a little pay for support for another year or 2 years or however long they wanna do it, and you just pay per year. So that'll get you security updates for another year, and I find this behavior, like, extremely deplorable, like, really, really badly, because, security updates are no fucking joke. You know, you don't wanna charge people for that because if people just opt not to be secure, you basically ransom them, and they've chosen not to pay your ransom. So, you have to just provide the updates. If you're gonna provide security updates at all, you need to just do it, or you need to limit it to server operating systems or something, you know, you gotta do something, but it can't be that. Like, you can't do that to people. So, I don't know why the fuck they're charging money for it just to, like, nickel and dime you for another fucking year of support for this, by the way, very arbitrary deadline they put on Windows 10. Like, nobody fucking asked for it. You know, it's Microsoft setting the date, and then they're like, "Oh, but if you pay us a little bit more money, you know, you can have updates for another year." Fucking thanks, Microsoft, fucking dickheads. So, forgive me for not really I generally don't vibe with Microsoft dick riders because, like, that shit that's horrible behavior. You know, that's just fucking stupid. Like, that's such a horrible idea, and Apple, of course, like, as much as they huff their own farts, they don't fucking do that shit, you know? They never do that to fucking macOS, make you pay for another year of support, they wouldn't even do that to you. And of course, on Linux, this goes back to I could make like a whole video on just stuff that Linux does better than Windows. But yeah, when you get security updates, you always get security updates. You know, for life. Like your computer is set for life, for free. They never charge you a fucking dime for these updates. You know, like what the fuck? Like all your packages get updates. Everything gets updates. Maybe your distro is out of support or something, like, I'm running post-market OS on a Chromebook, and I'm sure that ARM v7 isn't gonna be supported for much longer, but you do have it as long as x86 is still a thing, you know? And that's something that, again, would be another topic is how we might be moving over to ARM in the next few, maybe like 10 years or so. You might start seeing more people actually running ARM computers for their daily drivers. But yeah, I mean, I got tired of hacking around Windows and is actually when I get these new laptops in, because what's gonna happen is people are gonna say, "Oh, I'm not supported for Windows 11." I'm gonna go to the Hawk shop and I'm gonna give them my old laptop, you know, and see what they give me for it. And for these laptops, I may actually have to look into Linux support for these, and actually start making sure that all of these computers are Linux compatible. Because that's what I'm having to do for charity now. I mean, they expect that you have an up-to-date operating system. They want their people to be secure, so I give them Linux Mint, and it seems to work fine. But with laptops, man, I mean, you never know if it's gonna work correctly. And I could potentially, like, start bricking machines without, if I don't have, like, a Windows install for them or something. So, this transitionary period of computers switching over to this completely new operating system, and there's, like, a solid cutoff between what computers can use it and what can't. Like, by the CPU generation, that's something that didn't really or hasn't happened for a long time now. And this is all kinda new territory now. And Microsoft's really kinda putting their foot down, putting their foot right on your fucking nuts, and they're like, "Scream." You know? Like, this is actually concerning because there are so many computers that normally would be e-waste, and people won't realize that they're not secure, you know? Because they were expected to have just updated already, but Microsoft's solution is just throw your computer in the garbage, you know? So, we can't really do that. And I'm gonna have to find use for these computers because I may end up this may turn into a selling Linux computers business, and I may have to actually teach people how to use Linux on their computer, which is not something I wanna do, Usually when I put a computer out for sale, it's just as is, you gotta know what you're doing, you know? But with Linux, not a lot of people have used it before. So, but honestly, for people that are just like trying to get online with their computer, they don't really give a shit. They probably won't even update it. So anything would work fine for them. But that's where things get kind of concerning. And this all kind of wraps into what I was saying, where like you need a, again, like I said in the other video, you need to have a contingency plan. What is going to happen when Windows 10 goes EOL? Because there are solutions, but I'm quickly running out of them. And it sucks, it sucks. Because these computers are fine, they work fine, they will do what you need to fine, but they need an operating system. And that is why I'm glad I got into Linux when I did, because I'm going to be able to update these computers and use them, whereas other people won't be able to. So I do expect that I'm going to be selling Linux computers in the near future. That's basically what's going to happen. Because that's all you can do. You can't upgrade them to Windows 11. Some of them maybe, but I don't. There's a problem with the security updates, and I told this to somebody in the hobby club. Is he didn't bypass it, but Microsoft had relaxed their restrictions on installing Windows 11 on unsupported hardware. And basically, he didn't read the fine print where it said you forfeit security updates, and potentially the next version of Windows won't support your hardware. So be ready to jump ship as soon as that happens, And that's something I never really got about retro computer enthusiasts is they run a lot of old proprietary software instead of like, open source software, which kind of puts you in a hole, and LGR has talked about this to other YouTubers where they're like, yeah, I just run DOSBox because if something in my AT computer breaks, like my 486 or whatever, I'm gonna be stuck buying hardware for that era of computers. I'm not gonna be able to just go out and buy an off the shelf part. And that's something to think about with these older computers now is so many of them are repairable and they are usable and they can be secured, but Microsoft is like, yeah, get fucked, go buy a new one. And I don't think that's a good attitude. I don't think it's the right thing to do to people, but whatever, that's not my problem, right? And Microsoft has sort of enjoyed this monopoly over the desktop PC space and the laptop PC space and all that for longer than I've been building computers. you know, Hell, longer than I've been using computers, Microsoft has been dominant because with the Mac, you gotta buy a Mac to use it. It's not like, unless you're like rolling your own drivers and breaking Apple's TOS to use it on other hardware, Linux is your only option. That's really all you got. You got Windows and you got Linux, and there's like FreeBSD, but they don't really exist. Like, even I can't use FreeBSD. That's how fucking trash it is. So we're in the situation now where people are gonna have to update their computers or get the fuck out. And that may end up being what I have to do. I've already started. Obviously, I've started putting Linux Mint on these old computers, and that's how they go out now. So I have to worry about this stuff though because I am in the market of refurbishing and re-imaging and reselling computers. And this may be the excuse I need not to break Windows licensing to, just have somebody get a computer that works. I may actually genuinely have to move to Linux for these things. I just tell people if you don't know how to use Linux, fucking look it up online. Like that's all you're gonna get. It's sold as is with what came on it, and you gotta deal with it now. Because I've mentioned it before, but people always say, "Oh, I need something familiar to Windows," and I'm like, "How familiar do you need it?" Because there's the type of people that are like ultra boomers, and they say, "If this computer doesn't use Windows 8, I don't know how to use it unless it has everything set up the exact way I had it set up. I'm not going to be able to use it." And I'm like, "Look, Grandpa, you have not died yet. You need a new computer because you're fucking destroyed your old one, and good luck buying a new computer with Windows 8 on it." Like, you're gonna overpay, you're gonna get a computer that sucks. What you really need to do is just learn the new system. It's not fucking hard. Like, Windows is just as easy to use as it's ever been. It has the fucking internet button at the bottom, and it has the start menu, and what the fuck else do you need? What's so different about it? You know, everything still works basically the same. Just learn the new system. You know, like maybe the cut, copy, paste buttons, like the context menu is different. That's about it. Things look different, but they don't really act different, you know what I mean? Other than they fucking moved all their control panel stuff to new windows or to new menus, but these people aren't fucking around with control panel anyway, so who cares? Like, if you give them pretty much any version of Linux, if you give them GNOME, they'd figure it out. If you give them a Chromebook, they figure it out. If you give them KDE, they'd figure it out. If you gave them Cinnamon or whatever, like on Mint, you know, they'd figure it out. They'd have a relatively easy time figuring out how to use their system. But that's kind of where I'm at is I'm just trying to get people computers and get them to them at a reasonable price for people that are in need, you know. And it does suck because Microsoft has really kind of put me into a box here where I'm not able to use their system the way I need to. And it doesn't really work for me anymore personally, you know, so I'm quickly going from being in the market of refurbishing computers to becoming a Linux sysadmin basically for these, you know, for these old computers. And you can expect a lot of these, like, it's cool for some. There was a meme on the Reddit for Linux memes or whatever. I'm on their Telegram, and somebody had said, "Oh yeah, now that Microsoft is dropping Windows 10 support, we're gonna have all these cheap, you know, quote e-waste computers that have really good specs in them, and we're gonna have a really easy time installing Linux on them, and then we'll have cool Linux computers for cheap." Which honestly, computers were already cheap. Like, I still get ThinkPads for like $40. It's not expensive, but where I don't know, something to think about. I kind of wrapped a bunch of different topics in this video. Sorry for it being like 22 minutes long, but if you want to hear me ramble for 22 minutes, you know, go for it. All right, I'll see you guys later. Bye.